First run through. Okay, back to the beginning. Finishing touches.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me back. Much as I enjoy visiting your club, I have to say I am slightly relieved not to have to do an hour and 20 minutes doing battle with the M11 and the A120 to come and see you in person. But on the downside, my goodness, doesn't Zoom do a terrible job to our images? I'm so glad that your club has been able to send me the full resolution files in advance, because I've been able to look at them in all their glory, with all their color profiles in the correct gamut. Because once they get uploaded through Zoom, not only does it slightly change the color space, but it also compresses the image. So all that subtlety, particularly in the shadows and the highlights, gets lost in the compression as it squeezes it down the lines to contend with our video feeds and our audio feeds. So do trust me on what I say about your images, because I've had a lovely time enjoying them this afternoon. And some of the things I comment on, the subtleties, you may not be able to pick up through your computers this evening. but believe me, they are there in the original images. And please, please let us return to the days when we can all meet in person and all see the same image on the same screen and start to handle prints again. My goodness, don't we miss prints? Anyway, starting off with a fabulous model. When I saw this lady, I thought, my goodness, it's that famous actress, Sophie Okonayo, but I don't think she is, but she really reminds me of her. Very striking image. It's a straightforward image with those wonderful splashes of red. Despite wearing the glasses, you've just about managed to keep her eye in view, a little bit cut, truncated by that red frame. The main criticism, though, is the vertical. So you've got a wonderful perpendicular window frame in the background, and that vertical is leaning about 3 degrees off to the left. And it's, oh, for somebody with OCD like me, that's really slightly irritating. But a very pleasing soft light, great contouring on the face. So starting off with an 8.5.
Choco Dolly.
Another wonderful piece of candid model photography. And this lady is very contemporary with her, her beautiful mask on. But look at the care she's taken that her mask is made from the same fabric of that marvellous dress. Lots of repetition of colour and pattern in this image, particularly with her dress and the artwork she's presenting and the pattern on the box. The name Choco Dolly, her advert, possibly a little bit distracting. Your eye gets pulled to her pink backdrop. And it also rather bifurcates the image, that we've got the plain pink backdrop to the right and then the vehicle and the coat on the left. However, it's that pink dress on the right which pulls my eye away. And you've just got the arm and a slither of the dress. I want to see the rest of it or none of it at all. And I know it's difficult because her logo was there, and I can see why you cropped it as you did. Also, if you had a little bit more eye contact with the model, it might make it a stronger image. But again, some great lighting, some wonderful colours. It's a 7.
Here's Sunrise.
We adore these fleeting times of day when you've got the dew or the frost on the grass and then a little bit of mist as well. What is not to like? It's still quite tricky to achieve in camera with the contre-jour because the sun has risen, hence we've got those wonderful striking shadows coming through the hedge and from the tree. And although you've hidden the globe of the sun by the tree itself, we've still got some very bright lights in reflecting off those clouds and also low on the horizon. You've done well to control all those. Quite a yellow feel, a little bit of vignetting as well, makes the sky look a touch artificial towards the corners. But the main thing, that wonderful skate ramp, which my son would absolutely adore, throwing himself off with gay abandon when he's meant to be homeschooling, is actually a little bit of a distraction and pulls the eye away from the natural beauty of the mist, the tree and the hedge. Particularly as well, that little arched cover over on the right hand side. Not a lot you can do about that. It is part of the story, it's part of the picture. It's a quasi-urban environment, somebody's garden, but doesn't quite fit in with the tonality of the rest of the image. But I particularly like that tree line in the background with the mist and just those dark outlines of the trees poking in above. That's an 8.
Sophie with pearl earring.
Well, of course, very classic painting, which the author has taken to reproduce. You've done very well with the model with the same colour hair, the blue head covering. I didn't actually check it against the original, so I can't see whether you tied the same type of knot in the hair or not, but there we are. But looking at it photographically, you've got the eye contact, you've got that wonderful soft Rembrandt lighting on the face, you've got the triangle of light falling on the cheek, you have avoided the harsh shadows, possibly a touch dark on the inside of the bridge of the nose. Maybe you could have just lifted that a fraction, and of course the glint of the famous pearl earring. The texture there to imply age, to give us the feeling of similarity with the Grand Master, which you're comparing it to, possibly a little bit overdone for a PDI, although it can be quite difficult to gauge that when we're not producing prints anymore. However, this one is a held back.
cube of cubes.
Oh, good bit of sugar cubes. I tell you, since my family have been at home 24/7, I can't tell you how much sugar we are getting through. I had no idea that my son consumed quite so much every time he had a cup of tea, but there we are. That would be gone in a day in our house. It's quite a fun idea. It's inventive. I do like the little tumble of the sugar cubes down in the corner. I didn't count them, but I'm tempted to now. However, photographically, it could be improved a little bit. So firstly, the white balance is just a touch off. That sugar looks a little bit grey. It doesn't really look bright and white and appetizing. Certainly my son would not be keen to eat a sugar cube if it came out that colour. And secondly as well, when you're doing tabletop photography, you've got all the time in the world, especially during lockdown. We've got months. So mess around with your aperture, mess around with your lighting. This one is just a little bit soft. So it looks like the camera has had quite a narrow depth of field. It's focused on the big cube, and just those little sugar cubes in the pile in the foreground are just going a wee bit soft. But it's a fantastic concept. I do love a great still life, but in this competition, this image is a 5.
Cambridge Botanical Gardens.
Well, that's not within your local area of Halstead. Well, hopefully, well, I can see it's a summer image though, so evidently it was taken before our current restrictions. A very straightforward image, and we really enjoy those rich, vivid greens that our digital cameras do so well with. But the lighting that day, it's a little bit flat. There's not a lot of depth of tonality in the image. And also, often these overcast days can really help to super saturate the colours. And you've got those wonderful greens coming through, but it can wash out your deep blacks, your shadows, and also you can have problems with highlight with the sky. The sky looks very white and bland, and that's what you've got here. And with that white sky reflecting strongly in the water, it makes some very bright highlights there. So what you can do is look for details, go closer into your subject to get rid of the sky so you don't have to worry about it. You can stretch the contrast to give you some more depth of tonality, but you have captured the vibrancy of the scene, and the composition is also strong with those lead-in lines of the reeds bringing us into the fountain. But this evening, this is a 5.5.
Cafe Sphere.
Another fun image. And I don't know whether the sphere is a Christmas decoration or something they have up all the time, but it is great entertainment to go and get these distorted reflection images within a camera club. We do have the colour class from the sphere, which we're expecting, so it's a very beigey, golden, bronzy image. The interior of the cafe with the artificial lighting would also have been quite warmly lit, and you can tell that the white balance is about right because you've got a very blue light coming in from outside through the doorway. We have captured a little bit of action. We've got a waitress, it appears, with a couple of dishes coming towards us, a few customers in the background. But beyond that, it's not really very exciting or engaging. It's quite a straightforward image. Where you're literally just playing with the distorted reflection. So it doesn't challenge the viewer. However, it has been technically very well taken. There's a great depth of field. Everything is sharp, but this evening, this is a 6.
Cleaning Sally B.
Yeah, I want to be a bit careful about which part of her he's cleaning. I'm very glad he stood where he is, because this could be quite a compromising image. I hope you don't have any under 16s, any minors in your group. But again, look at the composition. The composition is very strong. We don't have the whole of the aircraft, but we know, even without the title, what it is. We can see the propeller, we can see the flight deck, the windscreen, and you've got that wonderful detail in the riveting. The author has also had to contend with a lot of brightness from the sky, but they've processed it very delicately and sensitively, in that they've toned down the sky without adding any grad onto the aircraft, and yet they haven't lost anything in contrast or vibrancy from the decal on the side and the coloration, the riveting on the aircraft. Strong depth of field as well. Everything is sharp, including the propeller blades coming towards us. So that is very strong. And I also enjoy the square crop, just focusing us in on the detail. I'm slightly sad that we don't have a little bit more at the base. We just containing Sally B's toe, just containing the chap's feet, and maybe if you've taken a seriously, he doesn't quite look like he's cleaning her. He looks a little bit staid, a little bit uncomfortable, just because the moment you press the shutter. Perhaps if you managed to get his arm out to the side so we could see he's actually cleaning the aircraft a little bit more. But I do love the comedy of the fact where he is stood in front of the lady's naughty bit, shall we say. So this is a 9.
Amethyst deceiver.
Now, we've had a lot of time during lockdown to have a play with a lot of these creative techniques, and they're becoming increasingly popular, particularly with a lot of the work through the RPS Creative Group. It's very fashionable at the moment to apply textures on top of our imagery and to get a more painterly effect by altering the contrast somewhat. And that's what we have here, yet you've still got that reality of the sharp focused edges round the edge of the cap of the Amethyst Deceiver. In terms of the colour palette, it's a very strong image with that wonderful rich violet colour of the fungus itself and the new fruits just emerging from the floor of the substrate. The rest of the image being much more like a muted, maybe even a Hessian canvas. I do find the texture though a little bit heavy, even more so in the Zoom presentation. As I said, it compresses all the tonality somewhat. However, it is a beautifully crisp image. Again, possibly it could be a little bit more graphic. If you're going to look down on a fungus, maybe you could have drawn out more of that effective diagonal as we look down on the fungus. The top left-hand side of the image is not working as hard as the rest. Nonetheless, it's intensive coloration and a great idea. It's an 8.5.
Dandelion.
Now here's another creative technique, but a little bit different. So again, here we have a texture overlay, but it's a lot more subtle. And similarly, the treatment of the dandelion head itself is much more delicate and painterly. So we've still got plenty of sharpness. It's a very credible photographic image, but with a lot of softness and artistic effects as well. Particularly enjoying that seed head emerging from the top right. It's almost as if it's flying off the head of that dandelion. And yet we've got, again, a very interesting choice of colour palette with our almost brick red background and then the very pale light and delicate green of the stem. And yet the treatment of the flower itself, which we know from our minds is white, is quite heavy, but it works well to anchor the lightness of that seed head again emerging off from the right hand side. So very strong graphically and compositionally as well. This is a held back.
Gravity.
This one takes a little bit of looking at because obviously initially you see the line of people there on the street. You see the sign in I assume it's Chinese, maybe Japanese. I think it's Chinese. Can't read Chinese, so I can't tell you what it is. And you think, oh, it must be one of these student protests. And then you see they're all holding apples. So it's very Newtonian. I love the way they're holding them on the head. I would like to think there's a firing squad of archers ready to shoot them off to demonstrate the Newtonian principles, but I suspect that that probably be infringing their human rights in case somebody missed. But it is a fun image. They're all smiling. I don't know what's happening off camera to the left, and I'm intrigued. I would like to know. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of interest. In terms of street photography, that's important. They're sharp. You've got just enough of shallow depth of field that the college buildings behind that look very Cambridge-esque are just falling out of focus. So we do really have to hone in on those faces and on their banner. Maybe the banner's just a little bit shiny. Again, lots of text there. I'd love to know what it says. This image is a 9.
Larcia fruitaria.
We do love a little bit of charcuterie. a wonderful bit and some great pork there on the left-hand side. But again, it's quite a busy image. I do love a bit of night photography. It's challenging, it gives us a different viewpoint, and it really makes your work stand out amongst the normal conventionally lit images that we normally see at a camera club. But here, because we're looking through two window panes and we've got that strong frame divider down the center of the image, it does give us an image of two halves, particularly as we've got the customers in the right-hand frame and we've got the staff in the left-hand frame. So there isn't really any crossover. The staff are looking to the left, away from the customers. The customers are looking at their wares. They're not looking at the staff. So again, we've got two very separate images. So if you've got street photography, you need your elements to be working together either with eye lines or with other lead-in elements that make them work together. Similarly with this one, a little bit soft on the staff members on the left-hand side because you focused in on the customers on the right. But lots of interest as well. It's certainly making me hanker after some post-dinner prosciutto or similar. However, this evening is a 6.
Abandoned boat.
This is bizarre. I mean, it's wonderfully lit, but I just ask, why? Why is there a toy boat in a tree? Has it flooded that high? The background looks tidal, so my brain can give us a bit of a story. Some kid playing on the beach put the boat there for safekeeping, got dragged off by the parent, or whatever. In terms of the lighting, it's very sensitively done. It could have been a difficult shot to light because we've got broad sunshine, we've got strong shadows. And yet here the contrast has been toned right down so that we've still contained the texture in the sky. We've got the sharpness in the leaves, the texture in the bark and the branches of that oak tree. And then the boat stuck in the little hollow. How strange. The boat's very small in the frame. So although it is a abandoned boat, you do have to hunt for it. It's not the most dominant part of the image. The dominant part of the image is the tree. And the tree and the branches lead us out to those mud flats of the sand, and we don't really see much else to draw us back in to the boat. But nonetheless, it's a very technical image, and therefore it's a 7.5.
Approach to load mill.
No, another site that's very familiar to myself with my National Trust membership. Not so much now, though. Not really got my money's worth in the last 12 months, but there we are. And it's another classic shot from Anglesey Abbey, looking along the load itself to the wonderful mill at the end. There's bats in there too. So if you're a wildlife photographer, go along and have a go at those. They're great fun to try and photograph. Every time they run the mill to grind the stone, grind the flour, it sets the bats off. So you get a chance to see them flying around during the day. It's really good, rather good fun. But at this image, in terms of the tonality, again, we've got a very bright sky, which is causing that path through the image and reflected in the water. So that is effectively acting as our vertical line through the image. Had you gone on a day which was a little bit more dull, a little bit more overcast, or even had more blue sky in it, then the brightest part of the image would be the mill itself, which is the subject, the bit you want to draw our eye into. However, in this image, my eye's being drawn to that streak of sky and the streak of reflection in the water. Having said that, though, the poplars on the left are divine. You've got that brightness of the light shining through the spring foliage, those young leaves as they just pop off the branches, and that amazing saturate. Oh, in fact, it might even be autumn colour. I'm talking rubbish again, aren't I? And we've got the wonderful autumn colours on the right-hand side, but nonetheless, you've got that wonderful saturated colour palette. However, this evening, this one is a 7.
How does she do that?
I wish I was as flexible as that and did the splits. If you don't know, that's how giraffes drink, because evolution has endowed them with necks that are shorter than their legs. It does seem a little bit awkward, but there we go. That's what they do. Very strange creatures, giraffes, in many levels. So quite a comedy title. In terms of the photograph, it's it's a fairly straightforward image in terms of technicality. It's wonderfully cropped, but the lighting's quite harsh. We've got a lot of contrast there, bright lights on the right-hand side flanks of the giraffes, and quite strong shadow on the left, which you've controlled and lifted somewhat so we can still see the markings. But the main thing is the depth of field is very wide. And so these giraffes with their marvelous cryptic patterning are doing what they're designed to do. They're merging with the busy background, the rocks, the trees. And there's a lot of detail for a viewer looking at two-dimensional image. The best wildlife images you see are the ones with a very shallow depth of field, which helps to separate your subject from the background. But nonetheless, the composition is fun. I particularly like the anthropomorphism of the expressions of the two standing giraffes looking at the one that's still drinking. So that's really amusing me as well, but it's a 7.
I really must get out more.
Yeah, I think if many of us, the thing that really worries me about the current restrictions where I'm trying to limit how often I go shopping is with a family of 4, if I just get to the day before I'm due to do a big shop and then one of us gets flagged up as you must isolate for 2 weeks, we're going to be absolutely stuffed. We're not going to have any, we're going to be resorting to eating that single tin of beans in the back of the cupboard, which is exactly what this photographer has shown us. This is another case of Zoom compressing the image because in the full file, we have got a lot more tonality here. The shadows are rich. The coloration in the baked bean tin is rich and yet not over processed. It's a very strong composition, not only with the corners of the cupboard leading into the thirds, but the fact that you put the tin on its side as well helps add a little bit more of dynamic to the image. And the lighting is so important as well. We don't have any harsh bright spots. It's almost as if it's been lit by a softbox or some diffuse light source, again with a natural vignette around the back of the cupboard. So this one is another held back.
Bottle party.
I think we've had a few bottle parties, haven't we, one and all? These ones look far more elegant and tasteful than the bottles that my husband prefers, which normally have Scottish names of West Coast islands on them. In terms of the photography, though, it's a little bit straightforward. I do love your bottle collection. They are really, really lovely containers. But I find the yellow background doesn't work so well with the colours of the bottle. So we've got 3 strong primary colours here, the blue, the green and the orangey yellow, which is repeated in the stoppers. It's also a little bit of a linear image. So although you have got some movement in the way that you've lined them up, they're not all exactly in a strong line. It doesn't still give us quite the depth of perception that we have in this image that we have with some of the others. Technically, though, it's beautifully taken, rich colours. You haven't got any bright reflections off the corner of those bottles. Possibly you pulled the highlights down quite a lot because I'm picking up some sense of greys on the shoulders of the bottles where I might expect some bright lights. However, this one this evening is a 7.
Dusk falling at Withendale.
I've no idea where Withendale is, but it does look a very scenic and picturesque place to be. This is particularly endearing through the softness of the colours in the sky. You've just got that peach coming through on the horizon, but you haven't oversaturated it. You possibly pushed the coloration of the grass up a little because that green is really, really vivid. And yet we've got the strong compositional aspect of that field boundary running diagonal through the image. But when you look at the image in detail, there has been some softness, some processing technique applied, which has lost a little bit of the clarity. And I can see how you're trying to add to the mist, make it seem more surreal, more smooth. But yet we've lost some of that detail, some of that crispness, made the image a little bit wishy-washy and foggy in terms of the focal point. But again, some wonderful softness of colours, particularly that mist just off on the right-hand side coming in the tree at the edge of the frame. This is a 7.5.
Dingwall, Scotland.
Another place I'm familiar with. I'm disappointingly not had a chance to go for some time now. And again, we've got the strong compositional elements there with the waterway leading off towards the town, pretty much as we had with the mill shot earlier. Only here we've got a larger expanse of water off to the right-hand side as well. But again, in terms of the processing, the author here has done a lot to bring out the mid-tone contrast, which has made the overall image look a little bit flat and lacking in tone as a result, because when we push the mid-tones too much, we lose a lot of our deep shadows and bright highlights. And here, you don't want the bright highlights because then I'd be whinging on about the sky being too light again, but you do need some really rich deep tones in the shadows, particularly towards the edges of the image, to draw our eye in artificially without forcing it by using a vignette. But compositionally, again, not only do we have the waterway, you've carefully contained those two large trees on the causeway to the right and their reflections. I particularly enjoy them and the bank of the hills behind. But this image is a 6.5.
Cuckoo in flight.
Oh, lucky you. Beautiful male bird there. And any bird in flight is challenging to photograph. And then if you actually catch an elusive species as well, that is putting you well on the way to great marks. And here, not only have you got the birds fully contained in flight, and I have to say, I normally whinge about birds and animals being framed quite so tight in an image. But because you've got, again, the diagonal of the way the bird is moving up to the top left, and the wings are encompassed up towards the corner as well, this is working strongly. We are slightly below the bird. I could have a bit of a whinge that I'd like to see a bit more of the face, not so much looking from underneath, but I can't really criticize anything else for that image either. Although you're looking from the underside, the bird has been well lit. I couldn't see any evidence of noise where you've pushed the shadows, and the focus is absolutely crisp and sharp. My goodness, you have nailed it. And if you ever hit, I think the only thing you might run the risk of is a judge going, oh, well, it's obviously a captive bird, because you'd never get a shot like this. Who keeps a captive cuckoo? I bet you that some judge will say it must be a falconer's bird or something. Ha 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 ha. It's a wild bird. It's fantastic. It's not even a ringed or a GPS track bird. I would say the background is just a touch dark. Maybe the little lights of bokeh of the sky poking through the foliage are a slight distraction, possibly, if I'm being really nitpicky, and that's my job. But it's a smashing image. It's a difficult image to take. You've nailed it. It's held back.
Velvet.
There's our lovely model again. And it isn't Sophie Okinayu, but it looks like her. That lipstick's great, isn't it? Real 1940s feel to the image. And again, with those wonderful roller curls in her hair. I went to a 1940s reenactment with my husband because he's got a 1940s boat. And I can tell you, it takes flipping all night to get your hair in any semblance like that, doing victory rolls, etc. It's fab. However, we've got great saturation, great focus, great sharpness. I haven't got an engagement with the model. She's looking off to the side. Her lips are slightly parted. She looks like she's caught between expressions. I'm not really getting any feeling of her emotion or any interaction with myself as a viewer, which is a shame. If she had her head to the side and she'd glance across towards us, then maybe I would have a little bit more, it would be a little bit more compelling. I'd be drawn into the image a touch more. But again, her costume is fantastic. The lighting on her face is great. You've controlled the brightness on the tip of her nose. There's some wonderful colours in her clothing too. But this one is an 8.
Party glass.
Somebody Somebody's had a lot of fun with their glassware collection, my word. And here we really have got the 4 primary colours, the red, yellow, green and the blue. And you cannot get any more intense coloration than that. It's just so vivid. Much stronger composition this time as well, that we've got the 3 strongly coloured jugs in the foreground, and then we've got the yellow one leading us up towards the yellow stopper on the top right, and that gives us our path around the canvas and brings us back round to the jugs again. And that little glass just holds the jugs together and fills in that gap without being too obtrusive and pulling my eye unnecessarily in towards that bottom part of the frame. I also like the way in this case that you haven't included the whole of the jug. You make me work a little bit more as a viewer by leaving the handle of the red jug and part of the yellow jug out of the frame. So enjoying this one much more than the previous jug image. This one is an 8.
The dance glass.
Great use of the monochrome, because I imagine that the costumes of these performers were very, very bright and gaudy. And not only do I like the viewpoint, the composition, I like the symmetry, but what I like even more is the fact that the lead lady in the foreground, smiling at you, looking relaxed, but she's just low enough that we've got the entirety of the Colchester Dance HQ showing behind. So we've got the context, the venue, we've got the label as well. If you'd been a little bit lower, or she'd been a little bit higher, she would have cut into that that text, and that would have been a bit of a distraction. It's a fab image. You've got the texture on the floor. I love the monochrome conversion as well. Great depth of field throughout. Only slight criticism. They do look a little bit like they're doing yoga at the moment, in that you've caught them. I'm sure they're very active, they're in motion, but I'm not getting the feeling of it the way they're all crouched down in the same position, doing that deep squat that they have there. But some great tonality throughout as well. It's a 9.
The whole world in her hands.
What a different type of shot. I've got no idea where you took it, and I don't care whether it's a straight shot or whether you put it together afterwards. Evidently, you haven't been up in space to take a photo of the Earth, so it's either an exhibition, an exhibit, or a poster, something like that. It's a lot of fun. I like the openness of the expression of the person with their hands outstretched. I can't tell it's a her from there, evidently. I can see the coat lapels. I've got no idea of gender, it's just a person. And it is a lot of fun. But in terms of the camera club competition, it's a little bit one-dimensional. It's like the images we have of people in front of street art. So you've taken a photo of somebody else's exhibit and you've added a person in front of it. They are interacting with the art, but I'm just losing. I don't have any texture or any detail in the person themselves. I've got literally just the silhouette, and for that reason, this one is a 6.5.
Oh no!
Oh yes. Oh, I didn't get the title. His shadow.
Sorry, shadow. Sorry.
That's all right.
I got put off my throat.
You were taking it back from the heckling, weren't you? How terrible. Do like a bit of heckling. We missed that from going in person. Feel free to heckle. Another really interesting image. I'll tell you what this one made me think of. Again, my kids have been really into Doctor Who, and there was this one with David Tennant where the evil monsters came, and you knew the evil was coming, the monster was coming to get you, because you ended up with too many shadows and the monster was in the shadow. So if you had one shadow, you knew you were okay. If you had 2, 3 or 4 shadows, then that was it. You were about to be destroyed by whatever the alien was. And here, this poor guy's got 5 shadows. So, oh no, he's going to be sucked up into the alien entity in no time at all. And some great tones again in this one. You've got a great white balance too, slight warm tones in the metalwork itself, giving us that feel of a base metal that the sculpture is made of, and yet we've got very cool tones in the shadow. and a little bit of texture around the outside as well, reflecting the warm tones of the metal itself. Bit of fun with the shadow. I do find the shadow number 1, if we're going in the 12 o'clock position, looks like he's had his feet chopped off a little bit. He doesn't actually meet with the statue himself. So if you are going to muck around with shadows and overlaying them, just think about, the viewer, the brain needs to process it and think it looks credible. So if they're just floating in the ether, then a shadow isn't, we know that shadows actually join to whatever's creating them. Similarly, the fact that we've got almost that frame around the edge, that extra rectangle, is just a little bit of an irritation personally to me. But I said some great processing here, some real softness of touch. This one is a 7.5.
Dragon Rapide.
What a fine aircraft. A good friend of mine flies the one down at Duxford on Joyride, and another friend of mine has renovated one down at Lasham. So if you want to go and photograph some of these in different colours, get down there. She's in a wonderful duck egg blue down at Lasham. But it is a beautiful aircraft. However, photographically, this is very much a record shot. If you were taking photos of the exhibits in a collection, then this is the image you would have. So it's very contained. The lighting is a little bit unremarkable. The sky's a little bit bright, and the viewpoint as well is just a little bit straightforward from behind the wing. So it's almost as if the wing and the struts are obscuring the eyes of the aircraft, the flight deck. So the best images of these aircraft we have on the grounds, again, is where we have some spectacular lighting, maybe a different viewpoint, a really wide angle lens, or a telephoto detail like we have with the Sally B. And also think about the lighting, try and make it a little bit more special, just to really give it a lift and make it stand out among the other images. However, it is perfectly sharp. It's technically extremely well taken. You haven't quite overexposed the sky. You've kept all the detail in the aircraft. And however, this evening, it's a 6.
Heavens above.
Heavens above, indeed, and they are. It's always tricky, isn't it, when you go into these wonderful religious buildings to try and do something a little bit different, because everybody does the shot down the nave, and you have to get that really technically good to make it stand out amongst everyone else. So you have to do something a bit different. And here you have, we're looking down these wonderful vaulted arches. You've got the big patch of light on the left-hand side, and that draws our eye into it. And we see these 2 people walking down this corridor, completely framed in that patch of light. But beyond that, it's pretty busy. There are a lot of people in there to look at. There's some display boards on the right-hand side. And of course, we're people. We want to know what's on the notice board. Is it the Camera Club notices telling us that the EAF competition's coming up again? Who knows? But another thing you've done really well is the converging verticals are not converging at all. You have got parallel vertical. Aren't they fabulous? I could get a ruler on there and it'd be accurate to a millimetre. However, because of that big bright patch of light on the left, and it is a little bit busy, this is another 6.
Queen Elizabeth II, Dubai.
Oh my goodness, this is another one that Zoom has absolutely annihilated. The author of this will be looking at the image coming through their laptop going, oh, what happened there? Because the original image with its colour profile, those colours are so. This is one where you've got a lot of subtlety in the shadows and subtlety in the highlights, which is lost going through the internet of Zoom. Not only have we got that spectacular liner, but the buildings in the background, absolute spectrum of rainbow colours reflecting off the skyscrapers. And then you've got the super high one, whose name I forget, somebody can tell me later, encompassed on the right-hand side. Does leave quite a bit of empty space along the skyline to the left, but that's how the Arabs decided to build it, so we'll give them their due. Ideally, compositionally, you'd want the ship looking, the bow of the ship looking towards the, is it something Caliph building? Can't remember, and have the high building at the bow of the ship rather than looking towards the stern and looking away up towards the corner. But, you know, that's where she was. The only other criticism, again, those two lights in the foreground coming up and just really, again, dividing the image vertically, cutting through the water. Maybe you could have removed them in Photoshop. Maybe you could have just shuffled to the left a little bit more and taken an image without them in. I don't know what was off to the left. But real subtleness of tonality, beautifully exposed image. So it's an 8.5.
Cuban car.
Now, I have to say, I've been judging a long time and I get conditioned. And when somebody says Cuban car, I'm conditioned to it being bright yellow or occasionally red. So to see this one in blue is gorgeous. And also the fact that you have used selective saturation, colour pop if you like. And also we get conditioned that people colour pop in red or yellow. And the fact that you've done this in blue is gorgeous. It's exquisite because blue is a cool colour. Monochrome is cool. We could see greys as cool. So although it is a selective saturation image, it tricks the brain into thinking that it isn't, that this is a genuine full colour image. And we've got those little touches of blue throughout as well. So not only have we got those exquisite tones on the car, but that little blue hose pipe and the blue in the sign and the lights, the recession walking down the street. Regardless of the processing, the composition is strong as well. We've got the car on the quarter. We've got enough light to make the bodywork gleam without it being harsh. And we've got those marvelous textures in the doorways, the arches, and then that wooden door that looks like it's going to have the skin of your fingers off if you touch it over on the right-hand side. And then we come on to the final processing, the way the car is painterly, almost as if it's been drawn, and then the background given quite a different treatment, so much softer, lacking the contrast too. But all that contrast, all those black points are in the car itself. This was a very carefully crafted image, which would have taken some time and a lot of thought, and it's being held back.
Floating.
Looks like a jellyfish, doesn't it? I have to say that I get bombarded by spam from a number of camera companies through my emails. And one of them recently has been trying to encourage me to do lots of candle smoke photography. And that's exactly what we've got here. So you muck around, you burn your candle. The trick is you have to burn your candle for quite a while for it to get to the right temperature that when you blow it out, it does the smoky thing. Because if you just light it and then blow it out, you'll be very disappointed. But this is fun. And again, it's a full colour image because we've got warm yellowy browns in the smoke and also those very cool bluey whites in the background too. Beyond that, it doesn't do a huge amount. It is a blob of smoke in a black background. I'm not getting much more context. It looks like it's been sliced off a little bit diagonally down towards the bottom left where the trail's been coming off. Possibly that's where the candle was itself. It is fun. It is an abstract. There's a lot of dark canvas around. Maybe you could just take the abstract one step further and turn it into a jellyfish or something else rather than just calling it floating. But it is a lot of fun to play around with these smoke images. This one is a 7.
Runner.
Oh, now this looks familiar. This looks like the Cambridge Half or something similar from the buildings. And I do quite a bit of running myself, so I was intrigued to stare at the Royston Runners chap and see if it was anyone I knew. In fact, I almost had enough time this afternoon to try and look up his race number to see if it was a name I was familiar with, but I didn't go that far. It is a slightly unorthodox picture though, because we look at the picture, it's called Runner. What do we look at? We look at the runner, but the runner's not sharp, and we go, oh. And even without the title, because the runner is coming towards us and he's the biggest person in the frame, that's the first place we look. And he's not sharp. He's very obviously not sharp because the photographer has decided to focus on spectators. And the most important spectator is the lady with the glasses with her hands cut around her mouth, shouting encouragement or maybe saying, what took you so long? Why aren't you going faster? So she's the most important part of the image, and yet she's not the bit you look at. You have to hunt around for her. And then when you found her, you look at the people immediately surrounding her. So you've got the girl to her right who's obviously looking at you and halfway through saying something, or she's got a sweet stuck in her mouth. The one to the right again is not interested at all. They're on the phone. And then you've got the person on the left with you feel something putting, I can't see what says in the bag. And they're also engaging with the wound, but they're a little bit cut on the frame. So there's a lot going on in this image. It's a little bit distracting. Maybe with a tighter crop, it would force us to look at the lady shouting the encouragement more than the runner himself. Maybe if you took a bit of the runner out and you took the chap on the left out and maybe just went down a bit on the top, maybe took it down to 2/3 of the size that you have now, we would engage more with those three people at the barriers because they're the important part of the picture. I love the monochrome though. Again, it's a dull, wet, overcast day. It's obviously cold despite the runner's semi-nakedness because of the warm coats they're wearing. So that's been handled really well. This image is an 8.
La Sagrada Familia, Barcelona.
Another amazing internal shot of a religious building. And you can see the detail, the stained glass. It's a riot of colour. But again, here, it's not a place that I've visited myself. And I find it quite hard to visualise how everything fits together, what the rest of the building looks like. You've given me an extract of the building, and that's fine. So in some ways, it becomes almost an abstract. But if you're going to do that as well, I need to have just a little bit more sharpness and a little bit more clarity through your image. So the sharpest part of the image are actually those triangles down at the bottom that look like organ pipes, but they may not. I can't tell quite what they are, leading up towards that bright circle of orangey lights. And then as we go up and we start towering up towards the roof, it gets softer and softer. Now, I know that when you're taking these images in low light, it's very, very hard, and they don't let you take tripods in. So you really are at the mercy of your camera equipment of whether you can get short enough exposure to stop any motion blur. But again, we've got a little bit of converging verticals. Well, on the plus side, you've got a great lightness of feeling in here. It's not a dark, dingy interior. You've got a rich saturation of colours of the lighting, those blues and greens coming through from the stained glass at the bottom of the image too. But this one is a 5.5.
How to make a strawberry milkshake.
Oh, this did make me laugh. I do love a little bit of imagination. You lot have obviously had too much time on your hands, but then again, who hasn't recently? But what a lot of fun. I hate to think what you used to make that red at the end, because the first one looking like milk, the middle one, we've got a little bit of pinkishness in the bottom. The fourth one does look like you've turned it into strawberry smoothie. But then the last one is so red, it's redder than the strawberry itself. I think even my kids wouldn't drink strawberry milkshake if it looked that colour. But it's a lot of fun. You've got the animation, the tumbling strawberry, you've got the storyline, and you've got, particularly that fourth image, you've got the corona of the milk as it splashes out in a crown, as you've got the strawberry impacting the surface of the liquid. I hope you didn't make too much mess, and if you did, I hope you cleared it up again afterwards. You've even taken care with the key line to match it in with the red of the strawberry. But there's always a but. It is a little bit linear, and you have presented it against a solid black background, which means that about 3/4, 4/5 of your canvas is doing not very much at all. And there's also a little bit of an artifact between cup number 2 and cup number 3. There's sort of a paler, slightly square rectangle coming through. It looks like when you've overlaid the images, there's been something left behind, which is just a little bit paler than your black background. So give us a little bit more of the stem of the glass, give me something down towards the bottom of the frame, maybe not towards, maybe a few more splashes up towards the top of the frame, even if you have to play with it and pretend that they're there with the red one, and that would bounce the strawberry on the left coming down into the milk. But what a lot of fun, this image, 8.5.
Elliptical.
Another one that Zoom really doesn't do just justice to, because this is a great graphical image. And again, in the genuine image with the file under color calibrated viewing, you can see that there is a wonderful smoothness of tonality up towards the highlights. You haven't got the banding and the loss of gamma that we're getting through the compression on the online view. And we've got those, again, those strong primary colours, the blue, the yellow and the red, even though it's coming out a little bit magenta through Zoom, but there we go. And again, the interaction of those strong shapes. I've got no idea what those things are, but they're fun. You've lit them entertainingly as well to give those really, really super vivid colours. And possibly, again, a little bit going on outside towards the edges of the canvas, particularly where we've got almost a reflection from the yellow one down on the bottom left. But nonetheless, it's a very strong graphical image. This one is a 9.
Shall we take the, as it's 8:30, shall we take the a break here?
That would be
Red, red rose.
right. So here we go again. Hopefully you're not all zoomed out at the moment, so we'll carry on going. A beautiful flower, and again, you've really got the depth of field sorted there, that we've got the whole flower in focus and wonderful soft foliage behind. You have gone slightly for the compromise, excuse me, I just adjusting here, somebody popped up on my screen, in that you've quite often with these images, people either include the whole of the flower, so we can see the context, we can see all the petals around the edge, maybe a touch of the stalk, or they go right in just for the center, so the whole frame is full of the petals of the rose and no distractions. And you've got a little bit, well, bit between the two, so we haven't quite got the whole flower, and we haven't quite gone in for the center of the bud as well. And also, it just makes it seem not quite as engaging or as really deep in tonality and saturation as you might have got otherwise. But a wonderful velvety touch to those petals as well, particularly at that one towards the bottom right. This one is a 6. And excuse me a moment because I just need, I've got my son calling me. Matthew's trying to ring me. What do you want? That's the problem with Zoom. You've got children as well interrupting you halfway through. Right, where were we?
Wake up and smell the coffee.
Thank you very much. Another really interesting tabletop image. It's great what you can find to take photos of in and around our own homes and close to home. And as I said, I do love a well-lit still life. And there's some great, those coffee beans, the way they've been rendered makes them look almost metallic. It looks almost like a bronze sculpture, doesn't it? The way the light's reflecting off those half beans, the way they've been roasted. They look amazing. But again, a little bit like the rose, we haven't quite got the full abstract and we haven't quite got the whole pile of beans either. So it's got a very similar feeling to the previous image, that we've got a little bit of the table in the corners and we haven't quite gone in for all of the beans as well. And with this one, it could do with just a little bit more structure to the image. I know it's an abstract, I know it's a pile of beans, but there are patterns within the piles of beans. There are similarities the way the center of the beans are lying. There's little lines you can find by the way the light is playing on the beans as well, the little diagonals and things. You can play on those and adjust your cropping accordingly to create a path around your image and give it some structure despite it being a pseudo abstract. But I love the lighting, I love the richness of the coloration in this one, but it is another 6.
Old roses.
Flowers are great when they start to go over, especially when you've got those wonderful rhubarb and custard roses that you can buy from time to time. And here you've presented them with a very commensurate background and a sympathetic jug in much the same colour as those petals themselves. I love the way the petals are just falling off these flowers, particularly that one on the left-hand side with their head drooping down, but it's still holding its shape together and facing towards us. I'm not so sure about the treatment though, because there's a lot of filters and effects that we can use in Photoshop which can alter our image. Some of them enhance an image more than others. So I find with this one in particular, I find the outlines just a little bit harsh. It's almost as if you went to an art gallery and somebody had drawn an image in, presented a picture, and they'd outlined it all in black felt tip pen, and then they'd done the most delicate watercolour inside. And personally, I don't find that style particularly enthralling, and I'm getting that similar feeling here with this image. The basic image is there, the coloration is there. I love the palette, but I don't like the final effect, I'm afraid. So this one is a 6.5. Gosh, we've had a run of low scores, haven't we? Dearie me.
Lebanon Christmas light rose.
This image is quite a lot of fun too. And again, it's another one where Zoom hasn't really done you a lot of justice. But we have got some really interesting patterns throughout this image. So the very cool lights from those LEDs, at least LEDs are giving us something, it's very blue light. And then the warm light from the vehicles whooshing along the house fronts. A little bit of structure in that you've got the recession of the line of the road and the houses leading up towards the left. Possibly a bit too much sky above, in that the sky is very dark. Obviously, it is very dark at night, but if you've got that much sky in the canvas, you want the sky to be doing something. So maybe some stars, or maybe a hint of light still with the sun very, very low, not quite pitch black dark, would really help the image along. Or just crop it lower, turn it into a letterbox and be done with it. Similarly with the bus stop on the bottom left-hand side, that pulls your eye out as well, because we always look at faces, we look at words, and we don't want to be looking at bus stop, we don't really want to be looking at dark sky. So maybe you could have just cropped it a little bit tighter to hold it all together. But wonderful exposure, and again, some great piece of night photography, long exposure, such a combination of techniques. This is an 8.
Misty morning.
Gosh, when we see these sunsets and the morning low level mists, we can't help but get our cameras out. And here, you've been quite lucky with the mist, because it looks like the sun's quite high already, and normally it would have burned those mists back. But that sun being slightly high does also give you, lets the image down a little bit, because the best misty morning scenes are the ones with the very, very subtle tonality throughout, the very soft and muted contrast. Here, because the sun is a little bit higher, a little bit stronger, we've got quite a lot of light on the grass. We've got quite a strong contrast between where the sunlight is falling on the fields and the shadows. And that's pulling away from that softness and the feeling we get from the mists. And also think a little bit about composition, because again, this one's just a little bit linear with the lake and the land and the mist and the hill and then the sky. We don't have anything leading us forwards or backwards into the image. We don't have those diagonals, the leading lines drawing us into the picture. But what an idyllic scene. I mean, you're so fortunate to see that wonderful trail of low cloud and mist rolling through the valley. This one is a 6.5.
Northern gannet pair.
Gannets are great birds to photograph when you do it well. They are difficult to photograph because they've got the classic seabird coloration, they've got bright white plumage, and then deep black wings. And here the photographer has done fantastically, because we can see it's in sunlight, there's lots of shadow there, but again, we haven't got the harsh contrast. We have got all the feather detail in the whites, in the highlights, and we've got all the feather detail in the darks, in that patch of seaweed and in the flight feathers, those black flight feathers looking almost chocolatey brown in this image. But the best part of this image is when you look at those birds' heads, because you have super saturated that yellow coloration in the crest and on the nape of the neck, and you have really, really stunningly captured that amazing blue eye-ring and the blue iris in the faces of these birds. And on top of that, we've got a little bit of behavior with the wings being raised and the interaction between the two birds as well. And the fact that the birds aren't overlapping in their heads, they're just almost nestled together, with the bird on the right-hand side just fitting exactly in the space underneath the beak and the neck of the birds to the left. It's a wonderful image and some great lighting, and I'll hold it back.
Waiting for the train.
Oh, it's our wonderful lady again in yet another costume change. I really hope she has somewhere private to go and get changed. I hope she wasn't having to, she did her makeup in public because I saw you take a photo of her. I hope she didn't have to change her clothes in public too. She looks fab, doesn't she? She's very relaxed. And this time, although she's got that far away gaze to the left as we're looking at it again, because she's looking at you and she hasn't got those parted lips, I don't get the feeling that she's halfway through doing something. So it does seem more relaxed, it does seem more engaging, and it's a more classic model view. The glasses are tricky, but again, you've managed to completely capture her eyes. We haven't got any irritating reflections to distract me from those amazing eyes and that wonderful eyeliner she's got on her upper lips. And yet again, we've got the bright red frame of the glasses matching the lipstick, and this time the hat on her head, and she's got the most amazing hair too. Oh, I'm jealous of her hair. Not too much distraction, possibly the yellow bar on the right hand side and the yellow rail that she is posing against are the two bits of the image where the colours are pulling us away from the palette that you use on the model herself. But again, some wonderful soft lighting on her face. Whoever took this series of images of this model is highly skilled in the use of the camera and making the most out of the diffuse lighting that's there. This one is an 8.
You, the ladies.
More bottle photography. You have got a great bottle collection. This one's quite amusing, actually. This is quite different in many ways because you've dressed them up with their pearl necklaces, which is rather marvellous, but the shape of the bottles, not only are they rather sinuous and make you think of the curves of ladies in long, flowing, tight-fitting evening dresses, but the shape of them almost makes me think like they do look a little bit like ladies that have got their legs crossed and waiting to use the loo, so with their bottoms just pushed out a little bit slightly more than they would do naturally, etc. So that amused me. I do quite like that. Photographically, though, I find that the magenta of your background is a little overpowering. I'd love to see a more neutral, softer tone there. The orange of the foreground, I think that works well because it reflects the colour of that first orange bottle. But the magenta is a very, very strong shade, and it does pull your eye away, where maybe if you'd gone for something more blue that would a bit pale, that would bring out the tones of the bottle on the right, the dark blue shaded bottle there. And maybe that would just balance the image a little better. But it is a great fun image again. This one is an 8.
The Hanover Band at the Mansion House.
Yeah, and again, looking at the way these people are seated, it looks like this is a contemporary image and that they're all well, a good metre, if not 2 metres apart. You don't normally see bands with quite so much arm room unless they're going to be very vigorous when they're playing the cello and bowing. I certainly know the orchestras I've seen or played in, you're all crammed in a lot closer. And if you're behind the second violins with your flute, you have to be a little bit careful that you don't end up with a bow in your eye at an opportune moment. No problems with that here. Again, great camera craft here. Lots and lots of saturation. It's beautifully exposed. There's a real lightness of feeling to the structure, the columns here. And the wide angle is always going to be a challenge. I think that my only real problem with the image is the V shape of the pillars you're shooting between. in the foreground. But other than having superhuman telescopic arms and being able to hold your camera out a lot further so you didn't get those in at all, there's not a lot you could have done about that. But it is a fun image. It's a very geometrical image. It's very much a pattern image that the players, the pattern of the players positioning on the floor almost mirrors the pattern of the tiles and the mosaic on the floor as well. So there's a lot going on. It's a fun, bright, airy image. It's an 8.5.
Vase with 9 sunflowers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. If you put it in, you have to count them. We're human, aren't we? This is another great fun image. It's very Dali-esque, isn't it? All that distortion and the wobbling vase. Well, I hope this wasn't a straight shot. If so, you've got some very strange fertilizer growing your sunflowers. But again, it is fun. The color palette, the tonality, the feeling of it is very much in keeping with the classic Van Gogh image of the sunflowers. Probably not quite in the same vase. And yet you've given us this distortion, which, as I said earlier, invokes Daliism and this hyperreal. It could be a piece of art. It's really taking photography to the extreme and showing how you can run with it. I do find distortion possibly a little bit too much, unless there would be some more explanation as to why you've given me that distortion. Because when we're judging photography in camera class, we're not just looking for people to be clever, we're looking for context and the reason. So you can be as clever as you like and run completely a curveball, but if you don't explain to the judge why you've done that, I think, well, were you doing that because the picture wasn't all that, or were you doing that just to be clever, or were you doing that because you were bored and you wanted to try a new filter? So if you really want to make your creative images stand out and run, you need to do something with the title just to help the judge along as well, to take them on that journey with you as to why you went down this route. But I do really enjoy that too. I love the swirl of the colours, almost the paint running in the yellows of those sunflowers. But this one is an 8.
The colour green.
It is. It's very green. What an amazing lily there. And again, it's just back to the comments I made about the rose. You've gone right in here for the interesting bit, that that protuberance among the green of the almost the mantle of the flower. But again, you've given me a little bit of the background too. Have you done that because you like the curve of the plant? Have you done that because that's how much you had when you took the photo? However, again, look at where your focal point is, because the bit that's most in focus is the sticky out bit with the water drop in it. But that bit is so close to the top right-hand side of the image that it's not the first place we look at. We look at that large curve, that large flat petal, leaf, whatever it is. I know the plant you've taken, I just don't know what the technical terms are for the doing bits. And that's not sharp. The sharp bit is 2/3 of the way along the sticky out bit coming towards the camera. So when somebody looks at an image for the first time, they look for patterns. They tend to look on the thirds first, and you need to help people. I like that picture we had of the runner. The runner was the dominant element in the image because of his positioning and his size, and yet he wasn't the sharp image. So it's the bit you looked at first and it wasn't sharp, and that irritates the brain. It's the same with this one. So the bit we look at first isn't the sharp bit, and then we have to hunt for the sharp bit. But there's some, again, wonderful saturation. I love the intense greens. I love that bright lemon yellow, and I also really like the little water drops too, because they add the extra element and really lift the image up. However, it's going to be a 5.5.
Rainbow reflection.
Now, this has got some absolutely classic compositional elements to it. We adore a wonderful wooden pier, and you're looking straight down the centre, so I've got perfect symmetry along that pier, and that bit is absolutely sharp and in focus. And we're looking along the pier, we've got the idyllic yachts resting, wonderful reflections, and then God was smiling on you. He gave you a rainbow, and look what's at the foot of the rainbow. It's not a pot of gold, it's a red yacht, and judges love red, because of course we look to those primary colours. We're naturally drawn to reds and warm colours in an image. But there is always a but again. We haven't quite got the image quality even in the full size image, because the camera has focused on the pier, which has left the yacht, which is such an important and integral part of the image, just a little bit on the soft side. And also the processing with the rainbow has left that a little bit bright and washed out. It's very difficult when you're photographing rainbows because our eyes super saturate the colours in the rainbow, and they look so vivid and bright, and yet our cameras just record the photons of light coming into the sensor, and we get them on the computer screen, and rainbows always look washed out. And then you try and reduce the exposure, increase the contrast, and the rainbow looks great and the rest of the image looks awful. So it's always tricky taking a great rainbow shot. I love the white balance in this one though, even without the rainbow. I love the textures and the light on that pier. I love the blueness of the light on the yachts, the water and the sky. But this one is a 6.
Show me the way.
Another really entertaining piece of night photography. I'd love to think it's a straight shot. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot more going on than that, particularly as you have to do quite a long exposure to get all the detail in those stars, and you're unlikely to get the beam of the lighthouse in the same shot. But what a piece of fun. You've got the negative space for the lighthouse to look into. You can imagine the yachts offshore avoiding the headland, and then the detail in the scars. If any of you are astronomers, I'm sure you can pick out all the constellations there. I'm hopeless. I only know about 3 constellations, and none of them I can pick out in that picture. So it is great fun. Possibly though, there's more going on in the bottom 2/3 of the picture than in the top third. You've included the top third to show me the sky. Possibly, again, I'm just putting some ideas out there. If it's a shot of the lighthouse and the lighthouse beam, I might be tempted to remove the top quarter, maybe a third of the image. Or I might have a go at going the other way. I might have gone even wider and had the lighthouse quite small in the bottom of the frame, and have like 9/10 of the frame, just the stars and the starscape in the background. As it is, again, it's not quite one thing or another. I'm not quite sure whether I'm really focusing on the lighthouse or focusing on the wonderful astrophotography above it. But again, it's great technicality to get the stars and the lighting on the lighthouse and the beam. However you've done it, it's 8.5.
Schoolgirls, Komodo Island.
Here we have got some candid, well, it's not like street photography, people photography, travel photography, and it's super. Again, it's an indoor shot that can be challenging in terms of light levels, but like we had with the Hanover Orchestra, the Hanover Band, we have got a real lightness of feeling here, and we don't feel that the image has been pushed because we haven't got any noise or technical artifacts in the shadows. Depth of field is superb. All 4 of those girls are sharp and crisp, and yet the rest of the classroom is soft, but we can still see what's going on. A little bit of natural vignetting out in the corners. Possibly that green window on the right-hand side is a little bit irritating, as it seems to be clutching at the girl's hand on the right. But I love the openness of their expressions as well. Some great light falling on their faces, and they're really enjoying having their photograph taken. I'd love to know a little bit more of the backstory behind this as well. This image this evening is a 9.
Frozen gladioli.
Another very soft and subtle image, and here we have got a painterly effect, but it comes across a lot more commensurate than some of the other effects that we've had previously. It makes those gladioli seem almost ghost-like, almost as if there's just an essence of gladioli left on your camera sensor. And similarly with the stems, the stems haven't got that vivid greenness. They're just going slightly khaki, as if they're almost over and starting to decay. And yet the flowers have got that richness, those almost tissue paper pinks and lilacs coming through. A touch of texture on this image as well. which is working very well. It's subtle and it's not overbearing. And we've got structure in the image too, with the line of the front of the gladioli sweeping up towards the right-hand side, and then the colours of the flowers, the blooms themselves, just filling the voids to the bottom of the frame. This image will be held back.
Okay.
This is an image which could have gone in a similar way to the gladioli, but in this case, it hasn't been quite so effective. So the texture is quite harsh in this one. And the thing when you're applying a texture is to make sure that it's there and it's subtle, that it enhances the image without distracting from the image. And in this one, that harsh texture does really distract from the orchids. But again, compositionally, it's strong. You've encompassed the blooms. You've got the whole of the canvas working with top of it leaning off towards the right-hand side. Haven't quite got those artistic sweeps that we have with the gladioli. What's really interesting with these orchids is the ones on the left-hand side, it's almost as if you've cloned them and duplicated them, but you evidently haven't, because the ones that you can look and see, they are subtly different. But it's really amazing how nature manages to mirror itself and reproduce itself as it produces these flowers up the stem, each one almost identical to the one below it. Some great colours in there as well, but this image is a 7.5. Now, of all the images this evening, when I was previewing them, first time I went through them, I didn't look at the titles. I only looked at the titles the second time through, as you would do if we were at a competition night and we had a run through and then we were judging. And when I went through the first time, obviously the strong element is the dark statue, the lady there with her shield, and you can see she's on a marble plinth with some other statuary, etc. And then there's the chap who is in exactly the same pose without realising it. But instead of glancing menacingly down at his shield and his enemies, he's looking at his phone. And that's hilarious. Oh, this is such a funny picture. I had to drag my husband in and say, oh, look at this one. And he instantly saw it as well and it made him smile too. And that's what we need in photography. We need to evoke a reaction in your viewer, whether it's a reaction of, wow, that's beautiful, I wish I'd seen that. Oh my goodness, look at that nature, I've never seen that before. Or, oh, isn't that funny? We've got to find some connection with the imagery. We have certainly got that. I do like the monochrome treatment. Photographically, though, pictorially, the sky is very flat. It's a very bright element in that top triangle of the frame, which is a shame. But that doesn't matter because it's all about the humour. The chap absolutely mirroring the statue without realising it. This is an 8.5.
Living on the job, all my brickworks.
Yeah, and again, we've got a real softness to the colour palette here. The warmth of the classic red brick, and then the vivid greens of the summer vegetation there. And it's lovely as we look through the brickworks, we can see that the housing, the house and the buildings beyond are made of the same bricks, which you would expect. I mean, if you're making bricks in Bournemouth, you wouldn't get bricks all the way up from London or Cheddington, would you now? That would be silly. So yeah, there's a story to be told. There's a lot of path though. We do like a path through an image, but it's very dominant in the foreground, in the centre. It takes up most of the image. So it's almost as if we're lacking a subject. We've just got the path and the bricks on either side. Again, this is an image where maybe a slice off the bottom might help the storytelling. We don't necessarily need the plants on the right or that palette on the left. We could start the story a little bit higher up and then there'd be a bit less path, because the path isn't the most interesting part of it. I don't think it does need a person. Some judges would go, oh, we've got a path, we need to have a person, or maybe a Jack Russell. Put a Jack Russell in it. No, I'm pulling your leg. It's an idyllic scene. It's, again, beautifully rendered, but this evening it's a 7.
Red deer in autumn.
They are looking very fine. You can see how well camouflaged they are. Their pelt is the same colour as the brackens. and their wonderful pointed horns are merging in brilliantly with the trees in the background. But you have done what we need to do. You have got a shallow depth of field, which means I can see my deer clearly against the trees. Quite bright light though, which again is putting lots of highlights on the trees. And although those trees are softer than the deer, they are still quite strong in the frame and vying for my attention. So the best deer images that you really see have got that smooth, mushy background. So the deer's almost standing in front of plain wallpaper almost, but you still can see the context in the bracken. What I like about this one is the symmetry, that you've got two fine stags there. You've got our main subject on the left and then his little friend peeking out from behind the bracken, so a little bit of interaction there as well. But possibly worth going back another time of day when the light's just a little bit softer, you haven't got quite so much contrast. So this one this evening is an 8.
Gainsford End Mill.
Now this is yet another wonderful low light misty image, but you can see here that the author hasn't increased the contrast in the processing, because the reason we love to see mist with our bare eyes is because it does reduce that contrast and it reduces the depth of field. So all these devices we use on our cameras to make an engaging image, mist does for us automatically, and that's why it pleases the eye so much. And so here we have got that softness of the background. We've got a lack of contrast, but we've got a richness of colour with that low sun, the golden light on the field and on the tree, and yet the cool blues in the mist tones. And you have kept the detail in that little bit of cloud cover in the sky. But above all, we have got the subject matter. So we've got lead-in lines of the wheelings, the way the crop, that field has been tended. We've got the strong tree on the left-hand side and those wonderful shapes and forms of the branches. You've got low enough that the branches don't run through the horizon hedge line. And then we've got that mill as well without its sails. And I also like the way you have given me negative space over to the right-hand side. The mill is very central, but the fact that the tree on the left is so strong works well too. So there's a lot going for this image, possibly a little bit too soft. Maybe over on the right-hand side, photographically, we could just have something just to finish it off again. But a very strong image this evening. It's an 8.5.
Moon in her eye.
Another very clever composition. Either that or you've got some very strange friends doing some great art that you've hung up. But it's a lot of fun again. You've taken a lot of images, taken time to put them together. It's a device I've not seen before, which is a little bit different. The part that does upset me though a little bit isn't the fact that she's got moon as an iris and a pupil. It's the fact that the white of the eye is so milky white. It's almost as if the eye is made out of marble. And I know with a lot of these portrait touch-up programs that you try and make the white of the eye super white because the model makes the model look attractive. But here it looks, I say it looks artificial, but of course it looks artificial because there's a moon in her eye as well. So you're not going to find that even with the most crazy up-to-date contact lenses. Yeah, it's quite a lot. The other thing that's slightly upsetting about the image is where the light's coming from. So the light is coming from the left-hand side looking at the frame, but then looking at the eye, it's as if the eye is coming from the right-hand side, and then with the moon, it's coming from the left-hand side again. So that makes it look a little bit unbalanced too, but it's a lot of fun, a great composite. It's a 9.
Yours.
Not mine, I can't catch the toffee. A wonderful action shot, my goodness, so much going on there. Very complimentary of the guy on the ground to have a tooth guard the same colour as the grass. Very interesting there. It's great you've left it in full colour as well, because we don't have a real clash of kids. They're both predominantly playing in red and black. and the fact that we've got the teams, two teams playing in opposite colours, so the red with the black arms and the black with the red arms works well as well too. You've got the ball in shot too. What an amazing action you've got there. The guy on the ground is making eye contact with probably the ball, but it looks like he's looking at us. The guy that's just passed the ball is looking ardently at somebody that looks like they're not quite going to receive it in time. The guy that's done the tackle is looking elsewhere, looking for his teammate to come in and get that ball and go and play and get the points for them. You've cropped it very close on the right though. That's the upsetting bit. We've got the whole image captures around the top. We've got space to the left. We've got grass to the bottom. And then you slice the guy's thigh off. And there's a little bit of a person or a hand creeping in on the right-hand side. And I suspect that that's why you have to crop it so tight to avoid the distraction of the out of focus player coming in to intercept that ball and keep it in play. But again, it's sharp, you've got the right shutter speed, you've got the right depth of field, you've got a non-distracting background, just plain grass, which is fantastic. So this one is an 8.
Summertime.
More bottles. I hope all these bottles and glasses came with very interesting contents that you consumed as well. But somebody's got an amazing glassware collection. You could almost be in Murano in Venice, looking at one of those wonderful storefronts there. This one, very, very different colours to the previous two. This time we've got all those warm days. In fact, I would actually be tempted to call this one autumn time rather than summertime, because we've got those colours that remind us of the autumn leaves, not with the bright yellows, which we associate with summertime, but with the more orangey browns as well. Now this one, I can't complain about the colour of the background because you've done it against white, which really brings out the coloration in the vases. And you can see the odd one out, the one on the left-hand side with the very blue handle, very much a colour that's out of place in the rest of the palette of this image. I like the way you've included the daylilies too, because the colours of the flowers match very well with the colour in the glass. But it is nonetheless a collection of bottles. A little bit, it's almost as if they're floating. I've got a little bit of reflection on the bottom against the white surface they've been presented on, but not really getting the excitement, the compositional excitement of this image that I had quite with the bottles lining up to use the ladies' loo. So this one is a 7.
The Gentle Lily.
This is an example of an image where you can take a straight image with a very narrow depth of field and then make it more painterly. So unlike some of the others where we've had texture overlays, etc., this one has got a very painterly feel because we've got the stamen and stomata absolutely sharp, and they're also the most boldly coloured part of the image. So that's where our eye goes. And then we look down to the fan of the flower and the petals, and that has got the painterly treatment to it, particularly down on the bottom left-hand side where you've got the softness of the other blooms coming in too. And I can see there's a lot of artificial blurring and lack of clarity to really give you that feeling, but it's so effective. This is a sort of image which is almost wasted in a PDI, and this is the image which would do so well printed on a fine art paper with a very light touch. Wouldn't be expensive on ink either, which is even better. We do like printing high key images because it keeps the costs down. So a really simple image and a very effective image. This one is a 9.
Symbol of hope.
More rainbows, no boats this time. And here we've got yet another rainbow, and again the author hasn't gone overboard to try and up the contrast to really enhance that rainbow, but I can imagine that when you saw it with your eyes, the colours would have looked even more intense, because in the presented image the rainbow itself is just coming a little bit washed out. We can see all the colours are there, but they haven't really got that intensity of the spectrum that we associate when we see these strong rainbows with our bare eyes. But what an amazing time to see. You've got almost a full arc of rainbow, you've got the double rainbow. And what I really like about this is the way you've captured the phenomenon that the sky is brighter inside the rainbow and it's darker outside the rainbow, because that is so often missed. And then pictorially, you've got that tree, and the tree inside the arc of the rainbow. I don't know how long you had to scuttle around to find that, but it is utterly super. You've got the lead-in lines of the field too. But as I said, the whole image, just a little bit on the bright side, just a little bit washed out. I'd love to see that sky brought down, probably a stop, to really bring out the deep intensity of that dark sky with the rain falling out of it. And that would also bring out the saturation of the rainbow as well. So this one is a 7.
Running late.
Hopefully, I was going to say another one of those setup shots where you have the period actors. Well, I hope it is, because otherwise you've got some very strange friends that run for trains dressed in sort of 1940s garb ordinarily. But again, you've got some great expressions on their faces. There's a lot of interaction in this image, whether it's one of those timeline events images or not. You've done very well here. So an openness of expression, they're both having fun, and the fact that you've got the guard on the train as well, looking at them with that bemused expression, that really makes the picture. Possibly a little bit bright on the edge of the train and a little bit bright on the signal box, but we can excuse that because we really get sucked in to these two characters running with their heavy bags. I feel a bit sad that the poor lady's got the big one, which you would assume would be the heaviest, and the chap's got the lighter one, but I guess she's got more shoes and dresses to carry than he does. This one's held back.
And that was our final image. And we have 8 held images.
How exciting. Here we go.
Press the right button.
Susan, the X brings up, I think, the,
oh, that's
the
right.
images.
Is it? Oh, let's cancel that. Sorry.
Cancel.
X.
X, yeah,
Oh.
pretty sure.
Oh, brilliant.
Have I got the right number? Hang on.
Looks about right.
One lurking down the bottom.
There'll be one there somewhere. Yeah.
It's the last one. Running late is just at the
Yeah.
bottom.
It's not scrolling.
That's all right. We know
we
what that
go?
one is. Hopefully it'll
I'll
pop
go
up once we start.
Yeah, I'll go through them one at a time.
So, Sophie with a pearl earring. She is a 9.5.
Dandelion.
Another exquisite and soft image. Another 9.5. Great. It is. I hope you don't work for Heinz, because this would be a great advert. Maybe you should try and sell it to them. You can make thousands in lockdown. 9.5. Technically very difficult shot. Absolutely pulled off. 10.
Cuban car.
Another exquisitely composed shot, beautifully presented. It's a 10.
Northern Gannet pear.
Still glorious coloration, glorious light. 9.5.
Bloody eye.
Another very different and artistic shot. 9.5.
Running late.
And finally, another 9.5. Well done, everybody. Fantastic images. And I really enjoyed the variety of the images from your club, because a lot of clubs you go to, they end up specialising in one particular genre, like portraiture or landscape or natural history. And here we've had a bit of everything. It's been a real delight to look at all your pictures. And don't worry too much if you didn't get the score that you were hoping for, because remember that my job as a judge is to separate you out in terms of the context of Camera Club competitions. Every single image I saw this evening was an absolute delight and a real joy to have the opportunity to comment on. So thank you, all of you.
Sarah, could you pick one of the two as your image of the evening?
Yeah, my image of the evening tonight is going to be the Cuban car. That one, yeah.
That is Jill Beckett, I believe.
Super.
Thank you, Sarah.
And Cuckoo in Flight is Tori Andrews. Well done,
Well
Tori.
done.
Do you want me to go through the 9.5?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, Susan. Yeah, I think that would be a nice idea.
Jan, can you just help me out? Which button do I need?
If you go for navigator, sorry, N,
Yeah.
I think you're right, and then tick score equals 9.5.
Yeah. And then we do, yeah.
Yeah, because I think you've ticked or better, so you get your 10s as well in there, won't you?
That is Brian Fleming.
Well done, Brian.
I've forgotten who this one is.
That's mine.
Well done, Jan.
Thank
Roger,
you.
is that Rogers?
Yeah.
And then Cuckoo is Tori. Cuban car is Jill.
Fantastic.
Gannett's, that's Tori again.
Well done, Tori.
Jill
Yeah, that's mine.
and Tori again. Well done, Tori, getting 3.
Good stuff.
Everyone, you can unmute and start videos again. And I think we're handing over to Steve. Steve, there you are, Steve. Evening, Steve.
I'm here. And Houston District Photographic Society have been delighted to welcome back the outstanding photographer, airline captain, glider champion and Doc Martin wearer, Sarah Kelman, who also has a passion for adventure and wildlife. Sarah's no stranger to this club, of course. In February 2019, she shared with us the photos of her journey on the sailboat across the Atlantic with her husband and children, then aged 6 and 7, which they did as part of the inaugural ocean race from Cassis in Portugal to the West Indies. And on the 23rd of January 2020, she judged our colour print competition and afterwards was subjected by me to a question and answer interrogation. And when I asked her exactly how moving over a wing profile provided uplift, she answered, witchcraft. Tonight's judging, Sarah, was as ever characterised by your succinctness. Your critiques were constructive and informative and perfectly paced as well. So thank you for that. I hope we can book you again next season, and perhaps we could enjoy your talk on photographing the wildlife of the frozen taiga, the northern winter, survival in the snow. In the meantime, could Housted members and guests please put their virtual hands together and make a virtual racket and show some real appreciation for a very special personality, a fabulous judge, and one who will always be warmly welcomed at our little club. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, please, for Miss Sarah Kelman.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Just before we go, just as a reminder, I think our next meeting is Monday and it's round 4 of the Top Dog. And the subject is urban landscape, which may not be the most creative we can have. I don't have a speaker for it. So if anyone would like to do leading of the evening, please let me know. Otherwise you have to listen to me droning on. Anyway, I think that's all for the evening. So I think tonight's competition was brilliant. I really do. I agree with Sarah. There wasn't a bad image in it. They were all really fantastic. So well done, everyone, considering the challenging times we're living in. Brilliantly done. So apart from that, it's just good night.
Right, Sarah, thank you very much indeed. It was
Night. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Sarah.
Sarah,
Thank you.
Thank you.